All right, so First Kings 15 and 16. So we'll go through First Kings 15:1 to First Kings 16:7. So we're going to start something a little bit new as we walk through the kings that'll take us up to the fall of Samaria. And that is, before we get started each Sunday, I'll give a little list of the kings that we're going to look at, who's with Judah, who's with Israel, so we can try to hopefully make sense of this a little bit better as we walk through. So we've already seen the first king of Judah, that is Rehoboam, son of Solomon, Rehoboam the fool. Rehoboam the pathetic. And then we had Jeroboam the first, who had great opportunity to establish a godly kingship in Israel, but then failed in that. So we had Rehoboam and Jeroboam ruling together, not together, but against one another at the same time in Judah and Israel. And then following that in Judah, we have Abijam and Asa. Now, one thing I want to notice now that we've put in the second color there, if the king is in red, that means he's an evil king or a wicked king. If the king is in green, that means he is a godly king. He is one who is faithful to walk in the ways of the Lord. So we can see Rehoboam and Jeroboam, both evil kings, both defied God's word. Abijam is also labeled an evil, wicked king. And then we'll have Asa, a good king. And then our two kings of Israel that we'll see this morning are Nadab and Baasha, both labeled evil kings. And just a little spoiler alert, all the kings of Israel will be labeled evil, wicked, or godless kings. So they'll all get that red color. So those are the four kings that we're going to look at this morning: Abijam and Asa in Judah, and Nadab and Baasha in Israel. So of course we're going to go through four kingships. We got some ground to cover, so let's dive in to see mostly evil kings with a little dash of good from Asa. So 1 Kings 15, 1 through 8, and I'll leave those kings up on the screen if you need them as I read through 1 Kings 15, 1 through 8. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam became king over Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. He walked in all the sins of his father, which he had committed before him, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, like the heart of his father David. But for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem to raise up his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. Because David did what was right in the sight of the Lord and did not turn aside from any of the things that he had commanded him all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. Now the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did are not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. And Abijam slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David. And Asa his son became king in his place. We always need to remember that when we have dates like this up by kings, those are always approximate dates. And you can see why the dates in the 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, why they should always be seen as approximate dates when we write them down based on the calendar. Because we read here that Abijam became king in the 18th year of Jeroboam. Now, does that tell us specifically what year in the calendar it was if he became king in the 18th year of Jeroboam? It doesn't. There's actually, when you go through all the kings, it actually ends up giving you a 3-year sort of sway back and forth to when the years could be by simply stating that one king became king at such and such a year in the other kingship of a king. So there's a little sway in when he became king. So these are all approximate dates. So Abijah became king sometime in 913 or 912 BC. So just a reminder that whenever you see dates that anybody writes down for the Old Testament kings, they're always approximate. Two things that are intriguing about the short reign of Abijam. First, his name. And his name is intriguing because he's called Abijam in the book of Kings, and he is called Abijah in the book of Chronicles. So Abijam and Abijah, while they sound very familiar, very similar, almost frustratingly similar to say, because you'll get tripped up between the two, the meaning of the two names are very different. We've already looked at Abijah And the meaning of that name, because Abijah was the prophet who prophesied that Israel would be torn from Judah and be given to Jeroboam. And when we looked at Abijah's name, we saw that Abijah's name means Yahweh is my father. Well, Abijam means Yam is my father, and Yam is the Canaanite god of the sea. So the question is, was Abijah's real name Abijah, Yahweh is my father, or was his real name Abijam, Yam is my father? We don't really know which way to go. But the interesting thing also about Abijah or Abijam is that when we read Kings right here, we saw nothing positive about his rule. His rule just looked entirely negative. But if you read the book of Chronicles, in the book of Chronicles, Abijam, who's called Abijam here, and he's called Abijah in Chronicles, Abijah is seen as a worshiper of Yahweh and someone who welcomed the Levites into the land of Judah and supported the Temple of Solomon. So two very different accounts. And I think the most likely way to try to bring them together is to understand that Abijam probably did worship the Lord. He probably did support the priests and the Levites, as we see in Chronicles. But while he worshiped the God of David, he probably also went the way of Solomon, which meant that he worshiped Yahweh, the God of David, while also worshiping all of the other pagan gods that were around him. So the fact that we see his name as Abijam in Kings and Abijah in Chronicles, it probably reflects the worship of Abijam. That you had a man who, on the one hand, worshipped Yahweh and supported the Levites. On the other hand, he was also a god who worshipped Yam and the gods of the Canaanites. He did all of those together, which led to him having a somewhat positive report in Chronicles, because most likely we believe it was the priests who wrote and compiled Chronicles. So they were happy for Abijah because he supported the priests and he supported the temple in Solomon. But the kings, that document's looking at the totality of his reign, and they're saying, even though he supported the temple, we're going to look at him as the negative as a whole because he also worshiped all the pagan gods that were around him while worshiping the Lord God at the same time. So what we see here is the gracious long suffering of God, that even while the king of Judah is leading his people into the worship of not only him, but also all the pagan gods that are around him, God still allows the nation of Judah to endure. So God is gracious beyond what we would expect, which is what I think a note that we get throughout Kings and Chronicles. He's more merciful than we would be in his path. And even when we're having a string of pagan kings, God is still being merciful to his people. Now we get a transition to the reign of Asa. That is the son of Abijam. And we see that his reign broken up into two parts. First, we'll see a revival of the worship of Yahweh and a denunciation of the pagan gods. So this is in verses 9 through 15. So in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa began to reign as king of Judah. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the sight of the Lord, like his father David. He also put away the male cult prostitutes from the land and removed all the idols which his father had made. He also removed Maacah, his mother, from being queen mother, because she had made a horrid image as an Asherah. And Asa cut down the horrid image and burned it at the brook Kidron. But the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly devoted to the Lord all his days. He brought into the house of the Lord the dedicated things of his father and his own dedicated things, silver and gold and utensils. So we have an issue with the text and what we see in the narrative right from the start, and that is the author mentions that Asa's mother's name is Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom, and that he removed his mother from being the queen mother over Judah. And that's an issue because we also read that Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom, was the king mother during the reign of his father, Abijam. And so the question is, like, did both of these guys just happen to have the same, mother who had the same grandmother in their marriages? And the most likely reason is that we did not. that Maacah, even when her grandson became king over Judah, she's like, I'm going to continue to be the queen mother of the nation. Like, I don't care what you all say. I'm not going to pass off my title and my authority. And it looks like a major role that she had during the reign of probably her husband and then her son was that she was involved in leading Israel into pagan worship, as we see that it was her horrid image that her son Asa cut down and then deposed her. So this is just another little sort of flavor there going on, that part of the thing that is leading these kings into all of this idolatry is the women who are by their side. Which is a reminder to all men who have faithful wives who also love the Lord, what a blessing it is to have a wife who loves the Lord along with you. So his grandmother was involved in the pagan worship practices and the reign of Abijam, and thankfully Asa deposed her and took her from that role. And also, let's notice what made Asa be seen as a good, faithful king in the eyes of God. It was not necessarily that Asa had a superior moral lifestyle, but what made Asa a good, godly king is that Asa had exclusive worship of Yahweh. This is the key to his reign. He only worshiped the Lord. He did not worship the gods of the nations around him. He cleansed the land of the male prostitutes. He destroyed the idols that were used to worship the false and pagan gods. Now, we want to note that the text does say he kept the high places. Now, we need to remember we see this in multiple places in the Old Testament. The most famous is in Solomon, when he went to one of the high places to ask the Lord for wisdom, that those high places, many of them were at this time period dedicated to the worship of the Lord. So just because somebody's going to a high place doesn't mean that they're worshiping one of the pagan gods around the area, but there were high places that were devoted to the Lord. It looks like it might have been Hezekiah, who was the initial one who said, we're only going to worship in Jerusalem and at the temple. But the rest of the kings who were devoted to the Lord worshiped the Lord both in Jerusalem and also at various high places throughout the nation of Judah. So we see here a full restoration of worship to the temple after 2 generations, I should say, of the temple suffering from neglect and worse at the hands of 2 terrible kings, kings who took and stole, robbed from things that were dedicated to the temple. Items from the temple, remember, were stolen by Shishak of Egypt. They were used by his grandfather and his father for regular base use. And so finally, we see a king like David and like the beginning of the reign of Solomon, who saw the Lord as holy and set apart the items as worship to the Lord as those that are holy. And this really is what God is looking for from the kings of Judah, from the kings of Israel, and ultimately this is what the Lord is looking for us. Like, what God wants from his people is exclusive worship. He wants exclusive adoration. So I think one way to sort of apply this to our own lives is we need to look at what we devote our heart to and what we devote our minds to, and to see if God takes precedent in our hearts and our minds, and we lift him as our greatest priority in worship. We have a God who is very compassionate when we stumble and we fall into sin, as David did with the issue of Uriah, which is mentioned in the text. But what God is looking for from us primarily is exclusive worship of his name. And now we get a little bit more about Asa's reign as we look at a very important war between Asa and the king of Israel by the name of Baasha. Now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah in order to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to Asa, king of Judah. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold which were left in the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the king's house, and delivered them into the hands of his servant. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabarimon, the son of Hazion, king of Amram, who lived in Damascus, saying, let there be a peace treaty between you and me as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of the armies against the cities of Israel and conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel, Beth Makkah, and all Chinneroth, beside all the land of Naphtali. When Baasha heard of it, he ceased fortifying Ramah and remained in Tirzah. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah. None was exempt. And they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had built. And King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa and all his might and all that he did and the cities which he built, are they not written in the books of the chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in the time of his old age he was diseased in his feet. And Asa slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his place. So the reason that a lot of time is put into describing this battle is that this battle will be crucial to bring stability to Judah and Israel, and the stability that happens as a result of this I say battle, but it's more of a odd conflict between Syria and Israel and Judah. This brings stability to the region that will end up lasting for generations. So what brings this out is that up to this point, there isn't really a firm border between Israel and Judah. At some point in times, Israel conquers more of Benjamin. And at other times, Judah fights back and they conquer more of Benjamin. So there's this constant warfare between Israel and Judah over what really is their boundary. Well, Baasha decides that he's going to make an extreme move into the land of Judah by taking over and fortifying the city of Ramah. Now, Ramah is a key location for multiple reasons. First, Ramah is only 5 miles from the city of Jerusalem. And you don't want your enemy fortifying a city that's 5 miles from your capital city. That's too close for comfort. Not only that, but Ramah is situated on a key intersection for trade in the area. The biggest key is that in order to go from Jerusalem to the Mediterranean Sea, you got to go through Ramah. So that means all of a sudden, Judah and its capital loses access to the sea. They can no longer get there, which makes for them at this point, if they want to have any significant trade, their only 2 trade partners can be Egypt to the south and Israel to the north, which is a very bad place for Judah to be. Like they need that access to the sea. So this is in a position where Baasha can do 2 things at once. One, he is now always a threat to Judah because he's like, hey neighbor, I'm right next door. I'm only a couple miles down the road. And then also now all of a sudden Judah can't get to the Mediterranean Sea and trade with the wider world. And then all of a sudden Judah is cut off from the ability to have economic stability. So Israel's really, by doing this, they're in a position to overwhelm the nation of Judah. And in response to this, Asa takes all the available funds he has and pays off Ben-Hadad to the north, who is the king of Syria. He pays him off to attack Israel from the north. Now, part of me is surprised that this move is not criticized by the text, because most often, if kings of Israel are Judah, they pay off a foreign king to protect them. They'll have a prophet march in and be like, how dare you depend on foreign kings? You should only depend on the Lord and his might. But we don't see that happen here, which I find to be kind of odd, but it doesn't happen. But he pays off Syria. So Syria attacks Naphtali to the north of Israel, which then makes Baasha be like, I can't give up all my resources in Ramah. I got to go to the north to defend my nation. And as he's doing that, Asa immediately tells all the men who are in his kingdom, every man, doesn't matter who you are, all of you need to march to the city of Ramah, grab stones and timbers, which kind of shows us how different the world was back then. Like, could you imagine if the president was like, all you guys need to go to Baton Rouge and grab bricks and cement and bring it over to your city? Like, it would be nuts, but that's kind of what he's telling them to do. So they all march up to Ramah, they strip it of resources, and then they use those resources to build 2 cities that are farther north than where Ramah is, and then Judah maintains control of those cities. So they're doing two things at once. One, they're taking back Ramah for Judah, and then second, they're fortifying two cities farther to the north of Judah in the land of Benjamin, who are Geba and Mizpah. Now, the key for this is that this then establishes what will become the permanent borders between Israel and Judah. And one thing that we know, even today in warfare, the most likely thing to lead to conflicts between two nations is an unstable border. An area where the land is not fixed between two nations. So, like I learned about this a lot going to Burundi. Why is there constant fighting between Burundi and their northern nation to the north, Rwanda? They're always fighting because stupid Europeans, 100 years ago came and drew a line and they said, okay, this line is going to be where Rwanda ends and where Burundi begins. And when they drew that line, they drew it right between two different tribal groups where they would have never drew the line there. And so they're now always fighting over, should the section of land there belong to Burundi or should belong to Rwanda? And so they're constantly fighting over that borderland because neither of them agree to that land because it was set by people who don't even live there. So what Asa did was he established the border between Israel and Judah with Geba and Mizpah. And by establishing that border securely, he allows there to be somewhat of a peace between Israel and Judah because now they're not constantly fighting against each other in order to have a border. And so it was key that not only does Asa establish the border, but he secures two key cities to show, okay, the land north of that is yours, the land south of that is ours. So this is just geopolitically what happens in 1 Kings 15, 16 to 24. This is huge. This basically sets the terms of everything that goes all the way up until the fall of Samaria. So while it might not look that huge in the text, it's actually, this is a major, major moment by Asa. But we just talked about Baasha. The interesting thing is that Baasha is not the next king of Israel. We entirely skipped over a king of Israel by the name of Nadab. So let's look at Nadab's reign in 1 Kings 15, 25 to 31. Now, Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah. He reigned over Israel 2 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord of his father in his sin, which he made Israel sin. Then Baasha, the son of Ahijah, of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, while Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha killed him in the third year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. It came about, as soon as he was king, he struck down all the house of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam any persons alive until he had destroyed them, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. And because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, and which he made Israel sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked the Lord God of Israel to anger. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not all written in the books of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So there was a reason that the narrator felt like they could skip over Nadab and then go right to that war between Baasha and Asa. And the reason for that is Nadab is kind of like the William Henry Harrison of the nation of Israel. If you know anything about William Henry Harrison, you might not remember that name other than I think he was a US president. And the reason that most people don't remember William Henry Harrison, because what he is famous for is for being the shortest lived president. He got pneumonia while giving his inauguration address, and then he was president for all of 30 days. Well, Baasha was king over Israel for only 2 brief years. They were evil, and he's most likely known for the brevity of his reign. All we really know about him is that he was evil in the manner following his father, Jeroboam the first, which simply meant that Nadab continued to encourage the Israelites not only to bow down before the golden calves that had been built, but also to worship the gods that were surrounding them in the region. So remember, Jeroboam began as a worshiper of Yahweh, And then later into his reign, he fell into polytheism and the worship of many gods. So most likely Nadab started out his rulership by worshiping the gods of the region. And so, following the prophecy that was given to Jeroboam, Baasha comes in from the house of Issachar, and he wipes out the entire line of Jeroboam, also killing his son Nadab, who only had an opportunity to rule for 2 years. And then that takes us to the reign of Baasha. We have a really kind of weird chapter division here because Baasha's reign begins at 1 Kings 15:32, and then we have 3 verses on it in the ends of 1 Kings 15, and then we have the rest of his reign in 1 Kings 16, 1 through 7. So not really sure what's happening with that weird chapter division. One seminary professor I had told an old joke that whenever you see weird chapter divisions in the Bible, it was probably that the guy who was making the chapter divisions was riding his horse while he was doing it. And occasionally the horse would hit a bump and he'd make a bad chapter division. And this was probably one of those places where those horse bumped and we get one of those kind of weird chapter divisions. So the reign of Baasha begins in 1 Kings 15:32. There was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. In the 3rd year of Baasha, king of Judah, Baasha, the son of Ahijah, became king over all Israel at Tirzah and reigned 24 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the ways of Jeroboam and in his sin, which he made Israel sin. Now the word of the Lord came to Jehu, the son of Hananiah, against Baasha, saying, Inasmuch as I exalted you from the dust, and made you leader over my people Israel, and you have walked in the ways of Jeroboam, and have made my people Israel sin, provoking me to anger with their sins. Behold, I will consume Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Anyone of Baasha who dies in the city will be eaten by the dogs, and anyone who dies in the field, the birds of the heaven will eat. Now the rest of the acts of Baasha, and what he did, and his might, are they not written in the books of Chronicles and of the kings of Israel? And Baasha slept with his fathers, and was buried in Tirzah, and Elah, his son, became king in his place. Moreover, the word of the Lord through the prophet Jehu, the son of Hananiah, also came against Baasha and his household, both because of all the evil he did in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands, in being like the house of Jeroboam, and because he struck it. So there is shockingly little in the narrative about the reign of Baasha. You would expect there to be more. First, because Baasha is beginning a new family dynasty. He just wiped out the dynasty of Jeroboam after an all of 2 generations, beginning his own dynasty, and then he begins his own reign over Israel. And then the other thing is that Baasha has a relatively long reign. He rules over Israel for 24 years. Like in our context, that's 6 presidential terms. That's a long time. This is the 3rd longest reigning king in all of Israel. But if you look at the space that's dedicated to describe the reign of Baasha, that's the same exact amount of time that's given to describe the reign of Zimri, a later king of Israel. And sort of the interesting thing is Baasha's given this short period of time to describe his reign. He's given about the same amount of time that's described the reign of Zimri. Zimri reigned over Israel for 7 days. So one king that reigns over 7 days, another king reigns over Israel for 24 years, and they're given the same amount of space in the biblical narrative. And I think that this brevity of describing his reign is meant as a condemnation on the reign of Baasha. That this guy, from God's perspective, was worthless. He reigned for 24 years. He most likely accomplished good things for the people of Israel. If you remember, initially, he expanded their borders by taking them down to Ramah, although that didn't last very long because of Asa's counter move. But he was trying to do things for the people of Israel, but he didn't worship the Lord. He worshiped false gods. He brought Israel toward those. Since he was in opposition to the Lord, whether his reign was for 24 years or 24 days, in the eyes of God, nothing good was accomplished. In fact, according to the biblical text, the most noteworthy thing that happened in all of Baasha's reign was the prophecy of Baasha's death. because we spend all the time talking about Jehu prophesying the death of Baasha. We should make a note that Jehu, this is not the future king of Israel, because there will later be a king of Israel by the name of Jehu, but this is a separate king. This is a prophet. Based on what we will learn, what you can learn about Jehu in the book of Chronicles, Jehu is a prophet from Judea. And one thing that we're going to see is that God doesn't really care where a prophet was born, on where they will minister to, but God will have prophets in Israel speak against Judah. He'll be prophets from Judah speak against Israel. God really isn't concerned about that at all. So the proclamation here is that Baasha's new dynasty will follow right in the footsteps of the dynasty of Jeroboam, and that is, it will be a dynasty that will not endure. It will be the opposite of the Davidic throne, which will endure forever and ever in the person of Jesus Christ. But the throne of Baasha will come to nothing and quickly end. We need to remember that in the Iron Age, based on all the writings of the pagan kings, also on the biblical records with David, what was seen as the greatest indication that you had a powerful and effective reign was if your reign created a dynasty. Because that would be the ultimate power move, even if you weren't alive to see it, was to say, I made my kingdom so amazing and so fantastic and so huge that even when I was dead, it continued to last for generation after generation after generation. If you die and the kingdom is taken away from your son who immediately follows after you, that means you were a pretty weak king and people didn't respect you. And as soon as your son came to power, it was gone. So this was a great judgment on God to both have these sort of mini dynasties in the household of Jeroboam and the household of Baasha, to show that God has no respect for them and allowing them to have enduring rules. So it's hard to say what edification we should take away from this period of the kings. I think the biggest edification that we can take is that even if we're surrounded by wickedness and evil, we're surrounded by people who are walking away from God, who are encouraging the worship of false gods, generation after generation before us, and after that, and our neighbors all despise the word of the Lord. It still matters that we are faithful to God. It still matters that we are people of integrity, because here you have Asa in the midst of evil and godlessness, and Asa is used in profound ways, not only to bring the people of Judah to the worship of the Lord, to restore the temple, to restore the articles that are in it, but he also has the opportunity of establishing the border between Israel and Judah and bringing peace to both nations when it comes to their war among each other. So we're going to see times, it'll come right up with Jehoshaphat, where the kings of Israel and Judah are able to work together. And the reason they're able to have at least somewhat of peace in that is because of what Asa did to bring peace to the people of God. And then also remember, what God is looking for from us is really single-minded devotion. He wants us to worship him alone. He wants to be the priority of our hearts, our minds, and our lives. So let us be people who aren't like, okay, I'm going to show up to church on Sunday and worship the Lord, but then throughout the week, I'm going to live as if God doesn't exist. But we need to be people who always devote ourselves to Jesus Christ and fix our eyes daily on him.